Cool.
Hello. Oh, there's two of me.
I keep getting them. All right. Awesome. Do you want me to wait to share for a little bit?
Actually, yeah, you can actually start sharing right now. We're just gonna give it like maybe a few more seconds to see if things warm up and people join in, and we'll kickstart this thing.
I want to make sure I can find it. There we go. I did found it.
So it is currently, let me do this.
There we go.
All right. So I think it's 12:03, so I'll just get this thing started all the way. So yeah, so welcome everyone to this improving talk. So today we have Cheryl Neeser. She's one of our senior consultants at Improving, and she'll be leading today's discussion. And so before I hand the mic over, I just want to let our viewers know that the QA feature is located on the bottom of our screen. So if any points you have questions, you can post it here and I'll be more than happy to answer them, or Cheryl will be more than happy to answer them. I'll just give the questions to her. So yeah, before we start this off, Cheryl, you have the floor for this.
Hey, thank you, Henry. I'm like really excited to share my thoughts today on bridging cultural divides. And I'm really, really happy that you have all decided to attend today. So as Henry mentioned, put your questions in the chat. I've given him the thumbs up to interrupt at any point in time and share those questions with me, and I'll do my best to answer them. So with that, we'll just get started. A little bit about me, and trying not to talk too much, but I do have a couple of decades in different roles. I started as a programmer. I've been a manager, a BA, a program manager. And the thing is that I really can honestly say that I'm living my best life working with Agile teams. I love Agile. I started out really being interested in culture from a language perspective, and that brought me to IT. It's a long story, but I'm also a mom, a couple of bio boys and 2 Chinese-born girls. That's my double happiness chop. So it really is all about joy and double joy. I volunteer. I've been a teacher. I've been a coach for a number of different years, and what I love about teaching and coaching is truly seeing light bulbs come on, the inclusivity of like especially Special Olympic sports, and being able to see that we can collectively accomplish so much. And that truly, along with, culture and mindset, and I say I'm a believer in the power of stories, because stories collect us. Every human being has a story, and a story to share is something that brings us all together. So one of the other things I put in here is that my strengths really do help me lead, not only with strategic thinking, which has helped me in my career, but also I have a large dose of connectedness, which means I can build those bridges. I can help teams understand and overcome obstacles. It really is about having an open and agile mind, and not even knowing as I got into Agile that these strengths of mine are what made me kind of fall into alignment with Agile principles and truly be able to, what I think is, leave the world in a slightly better place than when I found it. So here's what we're about today. This was in the abstract that was presented for this. So I just wanted to quickly say, there are a lot of things and variables that can be super frustrating and result in misunderstandings. So these kinds of disconnects really are detrimental to the way that a team can perform. And so how does this Agile mindset and the framework of a lot of the Agile frameworks help us with successful projects? How does that kind of enhance that community between onsite and remote, as well as vendors, anyone that we have to work with. And in today's world of complexity and the speed with which we need to react, it's really important that we can recognize what are those underlying assumptions and what are those things from a behavior perspective that we can learn or enhance or employ to truly make us capable of moving towards that goal that we're all looking for. So, quick thing here. How did I get here? Well, I was asked. We have Agile, month of presentations. This is our focus this month here in March. And I was asked, and they said, here's some things that you could choose from. And when I looked at the questions about how do you work with other frameworks like waterfall? How do you work with, this multi-vendor or outsourced environments? What about onshore, offshore? These are things we've been doing for a number of years, but what have I learned in the last 20 years in terms of working with these different systems? What about in-house, external? As a consultant, I have been working with in-house teams and, obviously with the vendor teams. Cross commits bring lots of different work environments and teams to us. So how have I been able to interact and develop relationships that really help with the communication process and the increased performance of a really collaborative team? So what's really cool is that oftentimes I'm thought of as an employee of the company if I'm working with in-house teams, but truly I'm external. And as a consultant, nothing brings me more joy than to think that someone thought I was in their HR or that I was actually an employee, and that when my time is up, and I have to move on, they're like, what? You're not an employee? And that's very satisfying. Also, how do we work with, different cultures? How do we work with different languages and time zones? And, there's a thing about, people talk about millennial or generational culture and how it's different. And what does that mean to us? I think a lot of the things that can impact our ability to collaborate well and communicate are the same. It doesn't matter if you're a millennial. And this big bogey here at the end is like, does AI, has it impacted our work? I don't have a ton of experience with that, but I'm really interested in it. So really, I think the things that we want to focus on are what are the gaps, what causes those gaps, and what can provide us, the means to overcome those hurdles, right? So before I move on, I just want to see if anyone has any questions. Okay.
Looks like we're all good to go. You can keep going.
Awesome.
Sure.
Awesome. That's perfect then. Okay. So the first thing is, what do I mean by culture? Well, when I started my, foreign languages at the time, it was all about like, oh, this is really cool. Like the way that different languages project, like birds flying on the sky or in the sky. Those were the things that really piqued my interest. And so when I think about culture, a lot of times it has to do with, okay, what are the customs? What are the social institutions? What did this group of people, come to mean together as a collective? And yet I also think that this biology verb, like you can maintain something in conditions suitable for growth. And I like to think about that, not so much as like, okay, cells, but like, what are the conditions that we create for ourselves or with different groups that are suitable for growth? Because it's really all about how do we foster that growth mindset, agile mindset. And then I found this definition from Carla, which is from my alma mater, the University of Minnesota. It's the Center for Advanced Research on Language Acquisition, which is really one of my passions. What I think is really cool about this is the culture is defined as the shared patterns of behaviors and interactions, which makes a lot of sense. These different kinds of constructs are learned in the process of socialization. So thinking of each of us as groups, well, I'm IT, or, I'm part of an Indian culture or a part of Chinese culture, or, I'm a vendor and, I'm part of the big, 5 or 10, and these are the ways that we work. These are the shared patterns that are that really help us identify that we're a part of this group, right? And it distinguishes us from another group. So sometimes distinguishing can get us in a little bit of trouble. And I mentioned earlier, and I'll just breeze through this a little bit, but one thing to think about with stories is we all have a story to tell. We are really programmed to tell stories, and it's by those stories that we can trigger engagement. Okay, engagement triggers the whole brain. It creates oxytocin. It increases our cooperation and our empathy. So think about that as you're engaging with other groups. Are there stories that you can tell or stories that you can elicit that people share conversations that create then an emotional, reaction, good or bad, because that's going to drive engagement. That's going to help you remember things better, and it's going to increase cooperation. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about real quick is like, what are those things that are either the different or the same in these different groups, right? These different social groups. So what really contributes to the division? Well, division is really around, I don't want to say us or them, but it truly is how do we recognize that there's a division regardless of what group we're in? How do we continue to collaborate? And one of the things that really can drive a significant uplift is vision, right? We want to know what and why. How do we feel like we're a part of it? How can we feel some sense of purpose as a result of contributing to where we are on a roadmap? What's the vision at the end of the line, whether it's a feature or whether it's a product or whether it, gives us a sense of, alignment so that we know where we're going. That's just a huge, big leap. And it doesn't matter if you're a vendor or if you're a cross-commit project or whether you're the team working on something. If you all know where you're going, it's a lot easier to do that in concert and to overcome some of the barriers around communication because you know where you're going. And one of the things that I found way back when in my early project manager and developer days is oftentimes, there may be a kind of a commitment to a sponsor. There may be that project charter, and I think charters are great, but they need to be shared, right? We all need to know where we're going. And it sets not only alignment, but it can help us with our expectations and assumptions. Like, what are we trying to do here? What kind of priorities do we have? Are there too many? Are we engaged on a fractional basis? Is there a lot of context switching? Do we have specialization? Or do we have a really cross collaborative team, one with like multifaceted skills to be able to address whatever the business problem is? So do we have a high level of support and maintenance versus innovation? Now we're being driven for innovation, but we've got all this stuff going on. And how do we make inroads into communication with, say, leadership to say, this is too much in a very respectful way? And then, there's change, right? So we have assumptions around change. Is there resistance? Is it a grassroots desire for change? Is it a top-down desire for change? Sometimes there's like, I can wait this out. Okay, I've got resistance. Well, that might be based on fear or anxiety, or it could be apathy for that matter, right? So how do we recognize that those things are happening? One of the things that I also know from my previous experience is that I've worked for companies in the past that have said things like, well, we need higher employee engagement because companies with real high employee engagement make more money. Or when I first started Agile transformations with a company, it was like, well, we want to transform to Agile because Agile companies make more money, without truly understanding what it is in terms of, feature delivery or that rapid feedback that we get with Agile. So just making more money doesn't always resonate with the hearts and souls of those people that are in teams trying to do development to progress the product along the lines to meet that vision, that goal. And then, there's always, I've heard this before. It's like that person holds it really close to their vest. They don't want to share. How do we move those people that are happy being heroes to being the traveling professor, right? Share your knowledge, enhance the worlds of everyone that you work with, and share your knowledge, because that makes everything easier for everyone. So I really, I think sometimes we have to think about, okay, people resist change, whether it's, it's sharing their knowledge, because, they don't like having change imposed upon them. So how do we craft the conversation with them to say, hey, here's an idea. What do you think? You've got all of this knowledge and everyone needs that. And, then you won't have to work, 16, 18 hours a day, because other people respect you and they want to know what you know. So how can you become our traveling professor? Sometimes language is a problem. In the past, when I first started working with teams in India, I knew that they were giving the Indian teams, communication lessons. How do you slow down? How do you articulate? How do you ask for time to think? These are all important things as well. And certainly the industry has grown so much in the last 20 years that, there oftentimes is like, well, I work with a team in India, and one would never know that they weren't sitting next to me in a company down the street, as opposed to in Bangalore or something like that. And just keep in mind that silence is okay. Active listening is still really important. And that thinking of silence being okay, it's really evidence of growth. It's evidence of introverts thinking in silence. They need that time. Extroverts may think by talking, so we have to listen. And then there's, I know there's an ambivert, and sometimes ambiverts talk up topic, but that's me. That's not for all ambiverts. So anyway, the tip there is like, try to count waiting for an answer. Let it sink in. I'm really analytical, so I need time. So I think I do that pretty well, to count to 25 if necessary. But, and then we have to think as well about capability. Do we all have the skills that we need to be successful? How do we help managers that direct support help team members get what they need to be successful, but also thinking about the team? Do we all have the same, do we all have the skills we need? Can we all work well together? What happens when a team member leaves, whether it's for another job or whether it's for another project? What happens when we get a new team member? All of those things can be additive or subtractive to the short-term velocity that a team may be working in, but it doesn't mean forever, as long as we can set up those constructs to be supportive and to give help by pairing, or by even just talking about, like, what is it you need and how can we help you? So each time there is a change in the team, we need to kind of recalibrate. What does that mean? And kind of move on. But all of these things really do contribute to a lack of shared understanding and transparency, and can either detrimentally affect, that collaboration, or enhance it. So quickly, I don't want to go through everything that I just talked about before, but I did mention a couple of things, that we have multi-vendors are outsourced, and sometimes that multi-vendor or outsource can even be like an internal outsourcing. It could be another project. So, what do we need to do to reach out and stay connected? So if we have teams that are working with Scrum and they're having, their daily scrums every day, or they're having planning, how do we invite others from other teams to join so that they know what's going to be happening in the next sprint? And how can we get other groups to share their schedules the same way? How do we get integrated so that we can develop those relationships so that it's easier to ask the hard questions? You know, in the old days, and I can honestly say old days is probably not that long ago, but for many of you, maybe it's before you were even out of school. There would be more than a few times when we would be expecting delivery to come to, you know, the next stage of the waterfall testing. And then the day of, they go, you find out, nope, we're behind, you know, we're going to be another couple of weeks. And those things are really frustrating because it compromises our ability to deliver high quality. And in the world of where there's only a release once a month or once a quarter, it compromises our ability to deliver to our customers, right? And to get that feedback. So thinking about that, we are truly facing unpredictable problems every day. So even in like the most simple, we've done this 1,000 times, we know how to do it, we can do it with waterfall, we don't need to, or, you know, like Kanban is great too. We can do it, but there are still things in even the simplest scenario that can cause us problems. And a lot of times we talk about, you know, what does it mean to, you know, build a dam? You know, we know the flow, we know the height, we know, you know, what's the flow of water, what are our material and labor costs and all those things, but we can't always forecast the weather. So thinking about that is like, even the simplest things can be difficult. And so what Agile mindset and growth mindset give us is that flexibility to know that we have a plan. The plan may change and we should be open to the change, you know, for all the right reasons. And certainly, you know, one of the things that I struggled with for a long time was time zones. You know, so I call out this time zone thing. And seriously, time zones, my best ever is this. I was talking to a vendor one day, and he said to me, so what would the one thing be that would, you know, really change your life to make it easier? And I'm like, time zones, you know, no time zones, really. Because then, you know, it's like 8 o'clock everywhere. I joke about that now, and I've kind of changed my approach a little bit because, you know, that's not possible. But one of the things that really helps build those relationships, of course, is seeing those people that are in a different time zone, working with them, having conversations with them, sharing stories, seeing, you know, their families, you know, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to meet because you've got a product owner in China and you've got a development team in Bangalore. And to continuously show your willingness to reach out and meet with them, even if you're like Kermit here, okay, I feel like I'm already tired tomorrow. It's important because you're building trust. You're building the relationship. And one of my very first mentors told me, it's the relationships that we have that get us through the hard times. And that has played out for me so many times. So I just want to say that, you know, I truly have amended my no time zones with Agile mindset and trust at this point in time. So any questions now? Anything that you want me to go back to and explain a little bit?
Just give it a few seconds in case anyone wants to think about it.
And hopefully I'm not talking too fast. So.
It's a good pace.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
No questions.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. So I'm going to go on to, you know, as I mentioned, you know, I truly believe that Agile enhances life. So I don't do this just as my profession. I like to employ the same kinds of techniques in my own personal life. And a little story, my husband was a project manager and a BA, and yet he struggles with like getting things done around the house. And finally, after many, many months of, you know, things not happening, he goes, could you do that sticky thing that sticky note thing, which is funny because he's like, Agile doesn't work. And I'm like, well, I've seen it work. Scrum doesn't work. Well, I've seen it work. Kanban doesn't work. Well, I've seen it work. So when he asked me to do that sticky note thing, it was like, woo, breakthrough. I like it. The differentiators, I think, are that Agile mindset and growth mindset are truly synonymous. And it's a thought process that involves understanding, collaborating, learning, staying flexible. All of these things help us gel as a team and to be able to deliver faster and better. And it's just a way for teams to change, respond to change, continuously change for the better so that they can improve their skills over time. Don't struggle around it. Like, just talk about it. Let's just figure out a plan. Let's experiment. And if that experiment works, great. If it doesn't work, let's try something else. What else do we have? We've got a lot of brilliance working around us. So, I'm sure we can come up with something that we can try and be successful. So the thing about growth mindset and Agile mindset is that, don't get put off by setbacks. Intelligence can be developed. It's the fixed mindset that's static. Embrace challenges, persist when there's a setback, try something else. That was an experiment. We failed fast. Let's move on. Learn from the feedback that we get and elicit that feedback, because that's how we can grow and change. And then, if it seems like criticism, be curious, ask questions. Well, like, why did you think that? Or like, why would you, criticize us for doing X? We felt like we were doing what you wanted us to do. So what was the miss? What was the gap? And how can we be better? It's all about being better is better than best, if I can quote my friend Brandy Olson. So find also inspiration in the success of others. This means, celebrate and recognize. That fosters that connectedness and that purpose that we're all going in the same direction and we're a team, which is like a very human social construct. So there are definitely things that are different in each of these different, like waterfall, vendors, etc. But underlying construct is still the same. These are the things that we run into. I worked after waterfall, but before Scrum, I worked with a team that used XP practices. And I didn't even know some of the things we were doing would like play out well in Scrum later in my life, or Agile just in general. But we worked with a product owner in the same office. That person, the product owner could, well, he was a product manager at the time. He could come over and he could see what was being done. He could celebrate with the team because, of course, they had a cowbell and it was pretty loud and a lot of people thought it was obnoxious, but it was a celebration of attaining a goal. So that was really cool. And XP, of course, like a lot of XP practices are things that we still use in Agile development, regardless of whether it's Scrum or Kanban or SAFe or less for that matter. It's just that we have these values and principles, and the values are truly individuals and interactions. It's working product, right? We can show you what we did and you can say, that's not exactly what I was thinking. Let's tweak something. And the team can either say, okay, we'll do that, in a couple of days, next sprint, or, it's really super simple, we can do it now. In customer collaboration, like I mentioned, that product manager was in the office and could come over at any point in time and see what was going on. That was really important because there you get that fast feedback loop. It's like, yeah, that's not exactly what I was thinking. Oh, great. Haven't really built it yet. I've got it on my local, I can send it, but I can make that change really fast. Those fast feedback loops, whether it's with the product manager, product owner, or whether it's with your customer, internal stakeholders at any point in time during a sprint, or at the review to get that feedback. Are we doing the right thing? Where do we go next? Is like really critical, because that's how we learn and that's how we can incrementally improve. And, like responding to change, we've talked about that. We need to be able to respond to change quickly. There are also these 12 principles. And if you're not aware of them, I put in some links here. I would hope you go look at them because they are just core. It's core to the things that we work on. It's core to how we want to be as a team, and it helps develop trust. As you see in the little picture, we've got trust is like the roof, right? But the focus on empiricism, inspection, adaptation, what do we see? What kind of comments do we get? How do we adapt? How do we change, right? And that we're also dealing with a lot of other values around commitment. Like this is commitment to our team. It's commitment to quality. It's commitment to the goal. It's commitment to all of those things that we said we were going to do. And sometimes things change, but let's have that conversation. We're going to be open. We struggled with this, or a product owner might come and say, I know we just planned the next sprint, but all of a sudden this big customer like Walmart came in and they said, we got to have X. What can we do? Well, we can stop that sprint. We can start over and we can do what's right by the business, because we see from a vision perspective that this is super critical. This is a big client and we want to make them feel like we're listening to them, as well as to address their immediate need. Focus, one of the things that is like really important when I talked earlier about some of the things that really derail us is like context switching. So how do we focus, drive through things, get them done, show them off? Is it right? Great, let's move on. And then respect and courage. Those two things are really big as well. We want to feel respected and valued. We want to be able to also feel like we can say things, we can be courageous, and we can share information and not be kicked out of the team over it, because that doesn't happen very often. But there's always a fear, right? We all have fears and anxieties about things. So how can we ensure that we set the stage, that we emphasize the importance of trust and support and motivation? And one of the principles, before I move on, I just want to say back to that XP team, the one principle that when I finally saw these 12 Agile principles and I started with Scrum, which was a couple of years after, is that number 5 really has always resonated with me along with the others. But principle number 5 really is around building projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and the support they need, and trust them to get the job done. That says a lot. That's like, give people what they need, but also trust them, right? They're motivated, they're smart. Trust them to get it done. Don't second guess. Let them go. Let them be free to try and fail if they fail, but free to try again. And that, without even knowing, was something that we had back in the day when it was an XP team. So, and to this day, could be like years and years and years later, those developers not only work together really well in the office, those developers, when I was in India in the office, I would see them huddled around. I would see the Indian team huddled around a computer in the middle of their day, which is the middle of the night in the US, but they were actually talking with the team and they were pair programming. That is like, was truly amazing to me. But it was how the team chose to work. I didn't say you need to be up at midnight to talk to this team. So it worked out really, really well. So there are a lot of things about the principles that drive cohesion and drive collaboration. And I think that Agile shines a light. It shines a light for us to take a look at what are those things that we can do and how do we implement those practices. That transparency, inspection, adaptation is core. We want to be open so we all know at any point in time what's going on. We're going to take a real hard look at it and say, did we do the right thing? Did it meet our criteria? Is it done? And then we adapt when something needs to change, whether it's lean, as a core foundational lean, eliminate waste, improve your flow, whether it's safe because they have lean portfolio management, which is like critical to help teams not be spinning their wheels on 15 different priorities at the same time, whether it's Scrum or Scrumban or Kanban events, they all use the same underlying focus and principles of these values. Continuous improvement, experiment, feedback, metrics. I mean, one of the most wonderful classes I've taken in the last year was evidence-based management, and I highly recommend it. It's a scrum.org class, and it's fabulous. And if you don't want to take the class, at least to read the material, it's free on scrum.org website. I really recommend it for businesses that want to ensure that, wherever their vision is out there, that there are ways to ensure, like what are the gaps of, like, what do I have available and how quickly can I move and what are the obstacles that get in the way and how do I get there by doing experiments and proving out my hypothesis. So highly recommended. And then Agile values. Okay, life-changing. I swear, when I first started working with wildcard systems, they were like crushed under the burden of lots of work. And then they had a breach and that just made things worse. So as we really were rolling out Agile across an organization in a company, I was soliciting feedback, and they're saying it's life-changing, it's sustainable. I don't have to worry about, being on the, death march, every release. I don't have to worry about not seeing my family and feeling like I can commit my time to them. My wife, and this is like a direct quote from one of my wife loves Scrum. Why? Because they had time and they knew that what they were doing was the most critical thing to deliver value. And it was sustainable because that's one of the principles. You should be able to do this forever, or as long as you're working in the company. So that's really cool. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about briefly is okay, so it's life-changing, you can do sticky notes at home, all of that stuff, but what do the goals and events provide? So I talk about the values, right? Well, planning, right? What does planning give us? Planning is truly recapping the product goals and priorities. Okay, it sets the stage for the next cycle. And so your product owner does have a goal for the product. What is that? And what is it we're doing to meet that goal? Incrementally, right? So, and then we've got a daily scrum or daily stand-up. What does that give us? It gives us transparency. It's a forecast, where are we at today, right? Where do we need to go? What are we all doing? As I mentioned, it's we all know at all points in time, and I'm not just talking the team, but the team and people around the team, we all know at every point in time what's going on. It's being transparent about, I'm having a problem. It's being courageous about having a problem. It's asking for help, or it's team members seeing that this person needs help. It's seeing maybe from a metrics perspective that something's aging, and let's figure it out. What's the problem and how can we address it as a team? The retrospective is really, focused time to look at the opportunities for improvement. And as a team, what are those things that we can do? And what's the experiment that we may need to try to see if that makes life better for us? A review, that's that opportunity for stakeholders to see what's been done, to see how, the team is working to meet this product goal and to provide feedback. like really important feedback to say, are we doing the right thing? Where do we need to go next? How do we need to change things perhaps in the backlog? And the product owner gets to make those changes as the product owner sees fit. But it's really important to share because, again, that's another feedback loop. And it shouldn't be like, okay, we don't need to do this anymore because nobody shows up. No, it's important. So talk and make sure that your stakeholders understand their role and understand how important it is. And then, there's refinement. Refinement is like super important in helping with alignment, right? You want to make sure, like, what is that common understanding of the problem we're trying to solve? How does this help us with the goal? And I agree to the readiness of whether you can bring it into a board now or in the future, next sprint or in the future, whenever it's appropriate, right? So there are some things around these goals and events that are important. It's always thinking about, as we are trying to grow our capabilities and our competency, is like, okay, let's check in. Let's like bond a little bit more. Like, how are you doing today? I'm having a problem, or, I'm kind of like not feeling well, but that's okay. We're here for you. So take it easy and we'll make sure that we still continue on together as a team and the delivery. Rethink approaches. That's that experiment that didn't work. So let's try something else. And then value the small things, right? Recognize the small things. So I know this, you've probably heard this from other improvers, or maybe this is the first time, but trust truly changes everything. We've got a lot of trust behaviors, and what's cool about these trust behaviors is that they just dovetail so well into Agile mindset, all our values and principles. It's really about, listen, be that intent listener and be curious, ask the questions. I didn't understand, or tell me more, right? 5 whys. You can talk straight with respect, say, this is where we're at, and this is what our problem is, and we need help. Or, say, just, creating transparency. It's a pillar, right? It's a pillar of our Agile house. It's all about sharing everything so that everyone knows where we're at. And then, right wrongs. I've made mistakes. I can tell you, when I was first working with my India teams, I'm like, whoa, I said some wrong things. You know what? I didn't understand some of the things that were part of their culture. So of course I didn't understand. I had to ask those questions about, like, why is this? And then I find out, and then I can go back and I was like, I really apologize. My behavior was inappropriate. You know what? I made mistakes. I apologize. I'm going to change my behavior. And I want you to trust that as you see me play out this new behavior, that you will believe me and that we won't have any kind of bad feelings. Truly clarifying expectations. We talked about expectations. How do we know we're on the same page? I might have an agenda. Maybe I'm afraid of something, but I need to be able to share that. We need to be loyal to our team. Obviously, accountability, that's part of Scrum Guide now with the different accountabilities. Respect is one of our Scrum values. Being able to extend trust when someone you feel has done you wrong. It's still important to extend trust and give them here's the background. I'm going to be straight. I want to be open. I'm hoping that we can change things. I understand the situation better, and I'm extending trust to you. So I think all of those things are really important about keeping commitments. And obviously we're all about delivering results. We need to get better. And like I said, better is better than best, according to my sticker on my laptop and my friend Brandy Olson. But it's those things that are like, these are pillars, these are foundational, and then what caps it all off is trust. So ask those questions. What's your agenda? Act with integrity, be congruent. My strengths are all about, okay, I want to build connectedness. I want things to be better in the world. So how do I do that? I have to be congruent to my own values. So And so I can recap this now because I think it's about time. The recap is really to try to find that common ground in shared vision and delivery of value. Obviously, that's what we're trying to do, make a customer happy, be open to change, be an active listener, and assume positive intent. And when I put this in here, I mean, that really is from Jerome, I think is a Jerome Kurth. He wrote the book on project retrospectives. That was the first retrospective book I read. And it doesn't mean make a SS of you and me. It means really be open, right? Be open to the change. Be open to what someone says and clarify, right? Be that active listener. Be curious. Don't be judgmental. And I mean, I know this is a false attribution to Walt Whitman from the Ted Lasso episode, and I think it was season 1, maybe it was season 2, but it doesn't diminish the advice. And then inspect and adapt. So keep learning, keep being open, keep reaching out, keep developing those relationships, because our primitive brains really interpret social connections as a matter of survival. And so as a survival and as a community that's trying to make a better world, just keep in mind that stories matter, relationships matter, be open, be open to change and be curious. People want to be connected to something that's larger than themselves. So I think that moving into an agile mindset and an agile world is definitely a way to be part of something that's larger than oneself. At least that's how I feel, because agile mindset is life. Agile is life for me. So let's see if I have, oh, here we go. Last slide, I think. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for your time. If you have any questions, or the fact that you didn't throw me any questions that I could not answer, and for your connection. I want to just do some quick shout outs to my friends and coworkers for their fabulous improving talks, because they truly provided me inspiration. Emily Stickle and Glenn Gordon, Chris Wickett, and you can find recordings of their talks from the previous March Agile topics. And then please do tune in next week for Don McGreal's talk on Agile metrics. And if you want, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. So proud of the fact that Emily showed that she had a QR code in her talk. And so I put one in mine. And that's what I have today.
Awesome. Hey, great talk, by the way, Sharon. You got a lot of, not questions, but a lot of people cheering you on inside the QA. So if you want to check those out.
Probably all my friends. And I want to say thank you to Henry. He was wonderful, and Jordan as well. Today, they helped him with a lot of stuff. And Henry did provide me feedback from my first walkthrough. I truly, truly appreciate that.
Oh, right back to you, Cheryl. It was a good talk. I mean, we're going to still open this up for some questions, because we have, thanks for the pace for that. So if anyone does have any questions, they can still put in the QA or in the lobby chat if you're on the website. If people are warming up to the questions, though, I do have a question for you, Cheryl, that I'm a little curious about. Okay. I guess one thing I was wondering is how do you ensure that, cultural differences are taken into account when you're setting up project goals and expectations?
Well, that's a really good question. So Henry stumps the speaker. No. Actually, what I find is that most of the places I've been engaged, and even as an employee in companies in the past, is that people do truly care, right? And they do understand that sometimes we can have things that we're just not aware of. So how do we set the stage? How do we have those pre-conversations with people to say, what are you worried about? What am I worried about? How are we going to work together? And to work through some of those things in advance of sharing it with a larger team. we're bringing all the teams together and kind of doing that level set at the beginning. I think all of those things are like really important, and not to forget that communication needs to be pervasive, not just at the beginning, but it needs to be all the way through, right? It needs to be often, it needs to be pointed, it needs to be, we talk about 7 times 7 different ways. Well, that's not any different. So how do you set the stage appropriately? It's really bringing together those people that are going to be the advocates, right? That are going to be the champions in each of those different environments that bring together and get that common understanding, and then turn around and share that common understanding. And extend trust. I always say extend trust, like I always have a story. One of the stories I had is like, I had a great group of people from India working in the office that I was at the time. We worked together. Things always seemed to work really, really well when we were together. And then, they'd go back to Chennai, and then things would kind of fall apart. And then we'd have another group. And I'm like, just don't forget what this feels like, because you've lived it, right? So and now you can go back to your office. Just don't forget, just share, share the culture, share what we are doing, share how much you enjoyed working with us because of X, Y, and Z, and be really, very direct about what's different and what's the same. And then, with that, we extend trust. And I would always go, don't go back and forget. You have to remember us. But then there came a point in time when someone said, well, we have all this work to do on a fraud product. And they go, well, how are we going to do this? We can't afford to bring another team of people from Chennai. And I mean, let them do it. Give it to them in its entirety. And I stand behind this. I stand behind the fact that they will knock it out of the park. And the vice president just went, you're out of your mind. I'm like, no, in this point, like, we've worked together for a long time. I was an employee. I'm like, trust me on this. They have this. And that team absolutely knocked it out of the park. They delivered on time. They delivered with no defects. The product was like perfect. And, for me, that was a really big deal, right? That was at a point in time when, we had probably been working together for, I'm thinking like maybe 5 years or something like that, as a team. But so often the teams would go back and they'd kind of forget, and then they'd come over and then they'd learn, and they'd like, they'd just bloom. And then this last blossoming, I just went, they've got it. I know they've got it. So they did. They executed well. And it was really the beginning of something absolutely fabulous for that company, because then they trusted the capabilities of that team. They trusted the leadership of the team in Chennai. And to this day, that company continues to work with those people. And a lot of the people that came over as developers are now their leaders and their managers and their directors. And it's a really cool thing to see, because 20 some years later, I still see and connect with those people that I worked with when they were here locally in Minnesota. And it's such a cool thing to see. So I think it's all about level set and communication. And, what are the fears and what are the anxieties, and how can we put together some kind of plan and stay on top of that plan to continue to develop the relationships and see the obstacles before they become mountains. I hope that answered your question, Henry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for answering that, by the way. I forgot to turn on my camera. That's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think we're just gonna, looks like we still don't have any questions for Q&A. So that's a good find. Nothing on the website.
Cool.
So it looks like we're all good to go. And of course, I think a lot of you guys are connected to Cheryl, so you guys can connect her on LinkedIn and ask your questions there as well too. So it's always open. Cool. Well, Cheryl, it looks like we are pretty much done for today. Thanks for this talk, by the way. It was a really good talk. We're always happy to have you here. And to everyone that's on this call, thanks for joining us for today. There's going to be recordings of this session, probably in the next business day for our virtual events. And also just keep an eye out for next week where we have Don McGrill, who's going to be doing an improving talk on Agile metrics. So thank you everyone for joining. Oh, wait, I think I got something in the QA. What is it? Oh, thank you. Yeah, a lot of you are tuning on. I was like, wait, is that a question? Okay.
No,
I'm like, question.
I'm going to sign off. No questions. It's funny. You're right. It looks like Henry froze on me. All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone listening, hanging in with me. It's great. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Uh-oh.